Okay, we're going to have some time to discuss this in small groups, but first I'm going to go through this slide before we do. So we're going to look at what makes healthy boundaries hard. And the things that I want you to consider and to talk about in your small groups are, there's several here, and your group might just, this is kind of fodder for your discussion. So wherever you go with this is fine. The first piece is we want to identify our triggers. And as we're going through this, this is number 4 on your handout. So you can start to write down, and this worksheet is just for you. So if you want to name specific people in your life that are more difficult for you to feel clear about the boundaries with, can be really helpful. One, because it helps us to know that, especially if that relationship, so suppose it's a person that is one of your triggers, that is a place where it's hard for you to hold healthy boundaries. Sometimes it can start to feel like that's our whole world. Like we might have this idea of ourselves that like, oh, I don't have good boundaries, but it's really because this specific relationship is challenging. So then it can be helpful to think about, oh, okay, well, there's a lot of other relationships where I don't feel that way, where it doesn't feel as murky or as sticky or as hard. And we can start to learn something when we look at those together. So write down some of your triggers. Who are those people in your life that feel like it's hard for you to hold boundaries around? And Salwa, I see your question about should we hold questions? I love that. If you want to type it in the chat, you can. And otherwise, if it relates to what I'm saying right now, then go ahead and ask. Otherwise, at the end of this slide, I'll definitely have time for questions. And I can't see your face right now, Salwa. So um, hopefully that answers it. But feel free to come off mute if you want to ask something right now about this. Okay, so writing down like what people in your life are challenging for you to feel clear about your boundaries, maybe places where, so this physical space can make it more difficult. Our childhood homes can be one. If there's a place where you associate with being, being younger or being in relation with your family of origin, those can sometimes feel murkier. Maybe if we're in a crowded space, or maybe if we're alone. For different people, different spaces can be more challenging to hold boundaries in. And then what emotional state do you know is more difficult for you to hold boundaries in? And I love this acronym of HALT. It stands, and these aren't all emotions, but it stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And it's a good check that I like to do on myself because I'm very sensitive to several of these things. So when, if I am one of those things, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, then it may be harder for me to identify my boundaries, hold clear boundaries. I actually tend toward more rigid boundaries when I'm in those types of space of emotional states. So here we're really getting to know ourselves and what is hard, what's not hard. Where does this stuff get triggered? Because that's where we can start to focus in. Okay, so we're looking at triggers. And then what are the reactions that you have in these moments when your boundaries feel unclear or when they get crossed? We want to look at the reactions, and I love these 3 categories for looking at our reactions. What are the thoughts that come up in your mind? So one that plays in my mind often, this is like one of my, I call these the AM channel, the against me thoughts. A thought that will come up really easily for me is my needs are unimportant. So that's like my brain will go there quickly. So you can start to notice what are those thoughts for you that come up really easily when your boundaries are crossed or unclear. What emotions do you tend toward? I have a couple here: angry, scared, sad, and it might really depend on the situation and who it is and which boundaries are crossed. Like if a physical boundary is crossed, that might feel pretty scary. But it could be different for another boundary. But you can think into if there are emotions that come up predictably for you when a boundary is crossed, or with a specific person. You can really hone in to, if you're working specifically on like this situation or this relationship, then think of it specifically. Like, what emotions come up for you when that person asks that thing of you one more time that you are having a hard time feeling clear about? And then what behaviors do you have? So we look at thoughts, emotions, behaviors. What is your response in terms of behavior? And a lot of times these can be categorized in terms of a survival response: the fight, flight, or freeze. So you might notice yourself when a boundary is crossed, you want to fight, you want to approach that situation. Or you might notice yourself like, I just want to get out of there, I don't want to say, I just want to hide, I don't want to say anything. Or you might feel that real strong freeze, like deer in headlights, I don't know what to do, everything drops inside. And then how does this affect your interpreting? So thinking about this in terms of our work, and when our boundaries are crossed or when they're unclear in a work environment, it could be with a team, with another interpreter, it could be with like a boss or a supervisor, it could be with a consumer. Um, how does that play into any of these things? Okay, Salwa, I'd love to hear. I'm going to take this off. You have these pieces on your handout, so I'll have you use that when you go into small groups. And Salwa says, thinking about the need for bi-directional and your yard. If the other person doesn't have clear boundaries, but that's not my business. Yes, right. And so a lot of this comes back to, what is mine to do? What where can I better hold my own emotional boundaries, my own mental boundaries? Am I giving a lot of space to this person in my head? Am I giving physical space to them in my life? Am I receiving their phone calls? Am I, like really looking into what is mine and what's not mine?